Hi, welcome back to the Rainbow Bridge University. My name is Gina, and I am so excited to teach you today how to make an alginate mold and a plaster cast of a beautiful reptile. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk a little bit about the materials that you need for this process. The very most important thing is alginate. Artist alginate has been around since 1881. This substance is extracted from brown seaweed. If you've ever had a child at the orthodontist or you've had braces yourself, you remember when you had to open your mouth and they put that nasty stuff in your mouth to take an impression of your teeth. That was alginate that they used. This is completely non-toxic, and when it is mixed with water, it becomes a gel, and that gel hardens, but when it does harden, it retains beautiful definition of anything that you're molding. So the most important thing when you're using alginate is that you sift it before you actually use it. I use just a regular old sifter I got at the Goodwill. And the reason for doing this is you want to get any clumps out of the alginate, because a clump is going to detract from the detail that you're trying to capture in whatever you're taking a mold of. So you just want to do this for all the alginate that you're going to use for the particular project. And there's usually, at the end of the sift, some little crusties, and you're just going to throw those away. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our plaster. This is just regular plaster. You can get it at Lowe's, you can get it at Michael's, and you also want to sift the plaster. I have plenty here that's already been sifted. You need plenty of water. You're going to mix the alginate to a ratio of 1 to 1. All right, I also want to talk today about a releasing agent. I use Pledge. Pledge is a wonderful thing. There's lots of release agents out there that you can spend a lot of money on, but take it from me, Pledge works great. So the first thing I'm going to do is spray the bowl that I'm going to use. And that's just going to help it pop out of there when the alginate is set. So if you'll give me a second, I'm going to go get our wonderful volunteer. Okay, this is beautiful Liza. She is a hognose snake, and she is our volunteer for this video today. As you can see, I've frozen her in such a way that her head is just slightly elevated, and I've kept her, the rest of her body, pretty close to her body. Now we're going to spray Liza with just a little bit of Pledge to help her come out of that mold easily. Now we're going to mix our alginate. So I'm going to put the alginate in a larger bowl. Remember, it's a 1 to 1 ratio. How you mix the alginate is very important. You don't want to introduce a lot of air. So as you will see, I keep the whisk inside the alginate as I whisk it around. It starts to get a little thick. I'm going to put some more in. When you mix an omelet, you take that whisk out and you want to introduce lots of air so you have a fluffy omelet. That is not the case here. You're going to keep it inside and making it gets kind of hard, but you will see that it gets smooth and glassy, and you will get a feel for when it's done the more projects that you complete. I'm going to add just a little bit more water. If you use warm water, the alginate will set faster. If you use cold water, it gives you a little bit more time. So we're good here. Now we're going to introduce Liza.
Unfortunately, our tech forgot to charge our microphone, so I will be doing a brief voiceover for the parts that are missing their audio. First, I place Liza into the container. Then, before I pour in the alginate, I tap the bowl of alginate on the countertop. This will help move any air bubbles to the surface. This helps to ensure we get maximum coverage of Liza's body and her beautiful details. As quickly as possible, I slowly pour the alginate over Liza. In this instance, I'm not trying to capture the underside of Liza, so it's okay that no alginate is covering the bottom. Remember, we want to remove as many air bubbles as possible. But now the alginate and Liza are much more dense, so I tap the sides of the container to encourage any air to rise without causing Liza to move. Now that is complete, I let the alginate sit until it's set, and I might just go and charge our microphone.
Okay, so several minutes have gone by, and I want to show you what the alginate looks like when it's ready to be taken out. It's very rubbery and springy and mushy. So I'm going to just turn it over, tap it a few times. Now I'm going to encourage it a little more by just taking this blade and going around the edge. Voila! Like a Jello mold. So as you can see, there is some of Liza exposed already. And remember, I said I don't really care about the bottom scales. So I'm just going to remove this. I'm going to actually cut this off right here. I'm going to set that to the side. We're going to just take her gently out of the mold. I'm removing just a little bit of the top of the mold because remember, I don't care what the bottom looks like because that's where she's going to be sitting anyway. You just have to be very patient and take your time. Thank you, beautiful. I'm going to mix up our plaster, which I've already sifted. It is devoid of any clumps. Now, when you're mixing the plaster, you want the plaster to look like a thick milkshake. And again, you don't want to get any more air into it than you have to. So you want to keep the whisk in the plaster while you are mixing. You get those air bubbles to come up to the top. If you can see, I'm not sure that the camera can catch it, but you can, all those little bubbles are bursting at the top. So you want to just give it a second. Okay, so now we are ready to pour into the mold. And make sure that the plaster gets into all the nooks and crannies. Okay, I'm going to need just a little bit more to top it up. So I'm going to pour just a little bit more in here. I want it all the way to the top, so I don't mind if it's spilling over a little bit. All right, it looks like Liza is ready to be unmolded from the alginate. And this part takes some patience. So you just got to go real slow. You don't want to make a mark on the plaster. This is the most fun part. So once we get Liza out of here, It's going to take a couple of days for her to dry properly before we can paint her. You don't want to put your plaster cast in front of a fan. You don't want it to dry too quickly. You don't want it to crack, which is what happens if it dries too quickly. You just want to set it at room temperature and forget about it for a couple of days. I can already see when I found her head that the little hog nose came off. This is the part of the alginate that had her little hog nose. And as you can see, I've saved that and I will make her hog nose and attach that in part 2. Look at all that beautiful detail. And here she is, Miss Liza, our beautiful hog-nosed snake. She's going to dry for a couple of days, and then we're going to paint her and return her to her family.